Ever wondered which guns ruled the battlefields in COD Mobile's past? Today, we're going to find out. We're breaking down the complete history of COD Mobile metas from the very beginning to right now. You'll see which weapons were absolutely unstoppable, which ones fell from grace, and how the game has evolved over the years. To make this happen, we've done some serious digging. We're talking intel from iFerg's early days, combined with insights from Bobby Plays, Signu, and a ton of other pro players. Plus, after June 2021, you'll be seeing a lot of my own gameplay. Seriously, big thanks to those guys, iFerg, Bobby, and Signu. Their content was essential for putting together this COD Mobile time capsule. Starting before October 2019, which was in the beta of COD Mobile, the only thing we could find was that the PDW was incredibly strong, mainly due to one thing, hipfire. We'll see a sort of remaster of that later in COD Mobile's history. The first season of COD Mobile. I remember downloading it because my brother told me to, so I obliged. The meta wasn't super defined yet, which is the case on many other occasions when there's a huge update or when a game is just released. However, pro players and ranked tryhards pretty much found it quite quickly, after about a month from what I could find. We had the AK-74U, now the RUS, and the MSMC. For the ARs, we had 3 of them. The AK-117, which was the Flex AR by excellence, the Type 25, which was also kind of flexible but had a much faster time to kill, making it more reliable in close range, and the ASM-10, which was the long-range AR, but kinda like now, because it has a fast time to kill due to its 3-tap potential, it was a great anti-SMG too. The best snipers were the DLQ and the Arctic 50, and they stayed like this for a very long time. Lastly, we had the S36, but it wasn't shining a lot because of how good the ARs were in comparison. But don't worry, it got its moment later. Season 2, which at the time was also the second ranked season, didn't feature a massive amount of changes. However, it saw the fall of the best AR and the best SMG, which at the time were the AK-117 and the MSMC. The MSMC didn't entirely fall off the meta, but the AK-117 did. We saw a new weapon come back into the meta, the PDW. It was nowhere near as broken as in the beta, but it was definitely a really good SMG, incredibly far from what we have now with the PDW though. See, back in the days, the maximum strafe speed from what I could measure using YouTube videos didn't exceed roughly 4 meters per second, which is basic for aggressive SMGs nowadays. The PDW didn't make an exception. It was steady and had no recoil, but it wasn't fast in the way we visualize it now. Season 3 was the first season where I started to play ranked seriously, watching YouTube to find the best guns, etc. You might be asking why, and it was to unlock the AK-47 tank, which I got. The meta was still quite similar to what we had previously. Type 25 as the last meta AR, S36 as the best free-to-play gun, and MSMC and RUS as the best SMGs. The PDW disappeared from the meta this season. Not that it was bad, but people just went to more radical options rather than the flexible one that was the PDW. It's during this season that we saw the worst gun in COD Mobile appear, the HBRA-3. Don't get me wrong, the gun was good, but the only way you could have it was through a lucky draw. The gun was literally the best in the game, which made this the only time where we had a true pay-to-win gun in COD Mobile. Other than that, the meta was still balanced between ARs, SMGs, and LMGs, and from what I remember, it was quite enjoyable to play. And Season 4 is where things start to get really interesting. Season 4 featured another rank reset, and this ranked season, which ran through Seasons 4, 5, and 6 of the Battle Pass, was the first season where some of you probably ended up getting Legendary in Ranked. But that's not the point. The meta changed a little this season. The HBRA-3 was still on top, the ASM-10 made a comeback, the KN-44, which had just been released, was absolutely insane, and the MSMC suffered from a massive nerf, leaving only the RUS-79U as the best SMG. The S36 also disappeared. Sadly, I couldn't find whether it was because of a nerf or just a change in the game's rhythm, which made it unusable. Season 5 had the exact same meta. Most of the buffs and nerfs were related to off-meta weapons, trying to balance them to make them a bit more usable. This, for example, led to the AK-47 and the BK-57 being way more usable than before, but still nowhere near the top 5 guns. Season 6 featured the addition of the Cordite, which completely changed the SMG meta. The Cordite was pretty much a flex SMG, which back in the days meant it was good for around 25 meters. But in close range, thanks to an impressive hipfire accuracy just like the PDW in the beta, it was incredibly strong. for the ARs, since the meta shifted more towards the 4-shot kill ARs, leaving only the HBRA-3 and the KN-44. I've seen on some videos that the AK-47 was considered meta too, but it wasn't unanimous. However, Season 7 threw everyone for a loop. I'm not sure whether it's because of buffs and nerfs or what, but this short season was vastly dominated by only 2 guns, which was the first time we had a meta with only 2 guns. These were the newly released QQ9 and the KN-44, which had been around for a bit. From what I remember, we also had the ASM-10 and the Man of War, but that wasn't the season where we saw the 3 taps at their strongest point. Now on Season 8, this was the month where the meta was the least clear of 2020. We still had the KN-44 and the QQ9, which were incredibly strong, but we also had the rise of the historical 3 taps, the DRH, the ASM-10, and the Man of War. The player base, from what I remember, and the content creators, from what I could find, weren't agreeing on whether the 3 taps were the best or if the KN-44 was better. The QQ9, even though it was the best SMG, was often defeated by the 3 taps due to their slow fire rate but fast time to kill. And then came the update that changed everything: Gunsmith. This is the most game-changing season. In this season, we had the introduction of the advanced Gunsmith system. The meta wasn't defined at all this month. People were just trying new things like shotguns with slugs, max ADS time snipers, along with many other atrocities. Let's talk a bit about what this update brought along with the Gunsmith system. First, the introduction of bullet spread. Before that, the weapons were 100% accurate. With this new update, they aim to balance the SMGs and the ARs. However, since the devs messed up a bit at that time, we also had bullet spread on snipers, which meant that we had to stack bullet spread accuracy a little bit to have something accurate. Talking about snipers, they were the big winners of this update. If we talk about the skirmish time to kill, which is the ADS time plus the time to kill, all guns had around 400 milliseconds. Snipers back in the days had around 350 to 400 milliseconds of ADS time. After the Gunsmith update, all the full auto weapons saw their skirmish time to kill slow down to about 500 milliseconds. On the other hand, snipers saw their ADS time buffed. At that time, a DLQ had 316 milliseconds of ADS time, the same for a Locust without the stopping power mag, and an Outlaw was around 283 milliseconds. So until the huge sniper nerf, those were stupidly strong, but they went meta just some months later, and we'll talk about more about them later. After the Gunsmith update, as we said earlier, the meta wasn't perfectly balanced at first because attachments made some guns extremely overpowered and some got completely left out. But what really helped some guns get through was their originally good performance, such as good time to kill or damage consistency. Obviously, the 3 weapons which stood out were the ASM-10, Man of War, and the DRH. It's actually absurd how good they were at first, even though by today's standards, they would look awful. Side note, the meta was so bad I went to play BR that season and got my first legendary in BR. The meta mayhem continued in Season 11. You won't believe what happened next. I remember this season's meta exactly because it was the first time I really complained about it. The meta was basically the Chopper for medium to long range and the Echo for close range. Yes, the Echo is one of the worst shotguns nowadays, but when it got released, that wasn't the case. In addition to that, we had the release of the first legendary HVK-30, which featured the so well-known, even years later, large caliber mag. Back in the days, it offered roughly 30 meters of consistent 4-shot kill, with a 3-shot potential just like now, and a 2-shot headshot potential just like now. Nobody used it. I mean, I did, but nobody else did at that time. Oh, and lastly, we had the infamous NA-45 that season. All players who played the game between the 12th of October of 2020 and the 21st of April remember that sound and get scared even years later, even though that gun is terrible now. Even if you didn't play during Season 12, you know what happened. You heard the ancient ones talk about it. This was the Fennec Akimbo meta. Absolutely broken from 0 to about 20 meters. This thing was so overpowered that everyone had it in their loadout just in case someone used it against them. This is still, to this day, the strongest SMG we've ever seen. Like any other SMG in its prime would get crushed. Along with those Akimbo Fennecs, we of course had the HVK-30 and the NA-45. This was, without a doubt, the worst meta we've ever had, and people don't even fathom how bad this was. Like, genuinely, it was mental illness turned up to the max. Side note, the meta again was so terrible I went back to BR and grinded the legendary again. Season 13 offered a glimmer of hope. Did the devs finally fix the meta? Basically, they nerfed the HVK-30, not to the point where it wouldn't be good at all, just to the point where the 3 taps would get above it. They also nerfed the Akimbo Fennec, making the game playable again. The DRH, ASM-10, Man of War, and the HVK-30 were basically the best weapons behind the NA-45, which after 2 months was still not nerfed. In the first season of 2021, we had little to no changes in terms of patch notes, but a few things happened. First, we got the introduction of the Deagle Akimbo. Last time we had Akimbo weapons, it all went crazy. I wonder what will happen this time. We discovered the existence of the Arctic 50 stopping power, which could shoot every 600 milliseconds and one shot in the feet with a 350 millisecond ADS time. Yeah, back in the days, slow snipers were faster than a current Tundra. Oh, and yeah, the NA-45 was still doing its thing. The meta on paper was terrible, but I remember having quite a lot of fun, probably doing stupid things with the NA-45 in ranked. Get ready for a wild ride, because Season 2 of 2021 was a turning point. No more weird things, said the devs. We're gonna be serious and make a balanced game. Meanwhile, the intern went crazy and offered us the 4th best SMG we've ever seen, all seasons mixed, the QQ9 Max Strafe. This gun had 4.8 meters per second of strafe speed. Back in the days, this wasn't like only 10% above the standards for SMGs. No, far from that. That was 20% above standards. As you probably expect, it's impossible to have a meta where only one SMG is the best gun. We also had the Man of War as the best AR that season. I remember that the DRH and ASM-10 were also used, but the DRH and ASM-10 shined by being great in close range. Well, try being great in close range when something is strafing faster than you sprint. Oh, and yeah, the NA-45 was still around, but people weren't using it that much anymore because the player base was just mass reporting NA-45 users and they'd get shadow banned. This was one of the best metas in my opinion. We had the QQ9 Max Strafe and the Bison, which had just been released. It was incredibly underrated, and back in the days, it was just stupid in terms of range. It literally put the Man of War into premature retirement by replacing it as the long-range weapon people would use. This was also a season where everyone would spam snipers, mainly 2, the Locust without stopping power, and the Arctic 50 with stopping power. For the past 3 or 4 months, since snipers got 100% accurate BSA, they were incredibly overpowered. It was literally easier to snipe than to play with a full auto weapon. The reign of the snipers was about to come to an end though. What happened in Season 4? Before everything, this season brought us the biggest drama between the developers and the player base to my knowledge. The massive sniper nerf. You know what else is massive? The hit flinch after that nerf, or the ADS time, going from 313 milliseconds for a max ADS speed DLQ to an awful 400 milliseconds. Nowadays, we're at 369 milliseconds for a max ADS time, to give you a reference. But the most important nerf was concerning the blank scope. To give a bit of context before the advanced gunsmith system, blank scoping wasn't really a thing. What people did back then was a classic flash scope, or what people call blank scope, which is basically a faster flash scope. After the advanced gunsmith update, the bullet spread accuracy during the ADS animation was basically as accurate as when fully ADSing, meaning you could fire straight after about 50 milliseconds of ADS animation. That got absolutely nuked, and after the nerf, we had to aim fully to have 100% accuracy. Anything before that was considered hipfire by the game. Oh, and to make things worse, the QQ9 got replaced by its sister weapon, the QXR, which was the 3rd best SMG ever seen in the game. Just for the sake of having a 100% SMG meta, we had the Bison as the more flexible option this season. For Season 5, it was exactly the same meta, but the devs tried to buff the snipers a bit, but not too much so it wouldn't look like they made a mistake by nuking the category. By the way, that may sound a bit boring for this season, but it was a great meta, so nothing to complain about. But things were about to get shaken up again in Season 6. This was one of the most diverse metas we ever had. First things first, the QXR was buried into the ground, and the Bison was balanced so it wouldn't be able to outrange a Man of War. The newly released MX9 was overpowered, with a blasting 5.48 meters per second of strafing speed, which is still, to this day, the 2nd best SMG in history. Obviously, everyone slept on it. What people didn't sleep on was the Fennec, which got buffed like crazy, turning it into a really good close-range SMG. With that, we had 2 ARs. The AMAX with the M67 mag, which was basically the SKS but from 2021, and we also had the AS Val, which was the flex or aggro AR at that time. And because all diverse metas have an LMG, this one had one too, and it was none other than the Holger 26. Oh, and the shotguns were useless because the devs gave us the Shorty, which back then had 50 meters of one-shot potential, which was better than the KRM. Season 8 was noted by the nerf of the Fennec and the AS Val, which turned a really diverse meta into a more restricted one, with only the MX9, the M67 AMAX, and the Holger remaining in the top spots. A new weapon was on the rise, ready to claim its place in the meta. Season 9, again a really similar meta, but the M67 AMAX got replaced. The newly released M13 was really good back in the days. Combine that with the nerf of the M67 AMAX, a slight Holger nerf, and the M13 came out on top for the ARs in its first season. Prepare yourselves, because Season 10 brought a controversial change to the meta. There are quite a large number of occasions where I don't understand why the developers made some decisions. Season 10 is probably the best example. We had a fun meta that was diverse. Maybe it needed a bit of adjustment, if we're just being honest. But nuking everything and turning Type 25 into a super quick killing machine at close, medium, and long range with really good accuracy, stability, and handling? I don't think that was the best option. This dominant Type 25 era continued into Season 11, but there was a hidden gem waiting to be discovered. Same meta, except for one small detail. The CBR4 was, at the time, better than the Type 25. But again, like it happened quite a lot of times in the history of the game, people slept on it for the duration of the season until the Type 25 got nerfed, even though it was already worse than the CBR4. Now let's head into 2022 and see what the new year brought to the meta. Season 1, new year, new best gun. Even though it wasn't new, people just discovered it that season. We started this year with a pretty balanced meta between the Kilo 141 and the CBR4. Honestly, not much to talk about. This was a fun and pretty chill one. Oh, and the Type 25 got nerfed, but not enough, so some people kept using it instead of the CBR4. But Season 2 of 2022 holds a special place in my heart. Let me tell you why. My personal favorite ranked season of all time was Season 2 of 2022, and we had that same meta at the end of Season 1 too. It was, in my opinion, the most balanced meta we've ever had, not between all guns, but between the best guns. The MAC-10 was a beast between 0 and roughly 20 meters. The CBR-4 was a beast between 10 and 30 meters. And the Kilo was a beast between 20 and 50 meters. So for each map and playstyle, you could have something that would exactly fit and be extremely good. Because the MAC-10 at that period was basically a Fennec with MX9 mobility when it was in its prime. The CBR-4 was the easy-to-use weapon by excellence, and it was succeeding the Type 25 as the flex weapon by excellence. And the Kilo 141 basically had 38 meters of 100% consistent 4-shot kill, which in today's standards is already stupid for a flex AR, so imagine back then. Oh yes, because back then, the Kilo 141 was better used as a flex AR than anything else. Yeah, things change. Season 5 was basically the same meta, a bit more balanced after a few nerfs, but in addition, we had the Peacekeeper as an alternative for the CBR4, which was actually better statistically and practically speaking. But the CBR4 had been around for about 6 months, so not many people actually tried it this season. Season 6 brought a unique dynamic to the meta. It was a season of contrasts. The meta was quite weird. There was a huge difference between pros and ranked warriors and the rest of the players. Top tier players were using the KSP, which basically had MAC-10 like mobility along with an incredibly good range. But the issue was that the KSP is a burst weapon, so the skill necessary to exploit it is quite high. For the more normal person, we could use the Peacekeeper and the Kilo 141 for the ARs, and the MAC-10 for a more friendly SMG option. In Season 7, the Kilo 141, the MAC-10, and the CBR-4, which were around since February, got downgraded a bit. Not that they got nerfed, but other weapons appeared such as the Peacekeeper, which this time was clearly a better CBR-4 and Kilo 141, and the Switchblade X9, which was between the MAC-10 and the CBR-4 in terms of mobility and effective range. During this season, we could use various weapons, and it was honestly the first time where we had a balanced weapon pool overall. But yeah, the Peacekeeper and the Switchblade were just above everything else. And then in Season 8, something unexpected happened. This season featured a particular meta because for the first time since May 2021, a sniper was truly meta. And I'm not talking about something like an SKS or anything like that, no, a proper sniper. For the usual full autos, the two best guns this season were the Peacekeeper and the Switchblade X9. And what was the sniper that COD Mobile devs blessed us with? The ZRG. It was basically a DLQ on all stats, except that it could one-shot in the legs, which made it incredibly powerful. Nothing close to the mighty Arctic 50 stopping power, but still a really smooth sniper to use. Season 9 saw the Peacekeeper nerfed to the ground. How? Well, they reversed the recoil buff they gave it about 4 months prior. Kinda sad to be honest, but that didn't stop the game from running, and we got blessed with a new gun which has a really good mythic skin, the Krieg 6. This gun was basically a rupture between free-to-play and skinned players. In addition to the Krieg, we again had the Switchblade and the ZRG, which were pretty much the same as before. The Krieg 6 would dominate the meta for a while. Let's see how long its reign lasted. From this year's Season 10 to Season 5 2023, we had pretty much the same top 3. Krieg as the best AR, CBR4 as the best SMG, and Holger 26 as the best LMG. In addition to these 3, we had a few good guns. Like during this season, we had the Switchblade X9. During Season 11, we also had the Switchblade, but it would honestly get lost because of a change in game pace during the next season. Season 1 of 2023, we had the comeback of another weapon, the HVK-30. Actually, it wasn't a comeback at all because nobody used it at first, but it doesn't mean that it was bad. Actually, it was even better that nobody used it, because for the next 6 months, which is basically the time it took for the HVK-30 to get banned in scrims, it was absolutely insane in competitive play, and nobody used it until May or June. The HVK-30 would become a dominant force. But first, let's see what happened in the following seasons. So from Season 2 to Season 5, we had the Krieg 6, CBR4, Holger 26, and the HVK-30. And in Season 6, even though the meta we had wasn't awful, it was the same, so it got pretty painful over time. Thankfully, we had some changes. We had a new gun which was instantly meta, the Grau. Pair that with the HVK-30 as the 2 best guns, and you have a fairly balanced meta. On one side, you have the Grau, extremely easy to use and sort of efficient. And on the other side, the HVK-30, quite complicated to use, but powerful when you're able to exploit it fully. This balanced meta continued into Season 7, but a new challenger was about to emerge. We had the arrival of the Fennec. It got buffed back in December 2022, but it never really fitted the game's pace. Finally, in this season, for some reason, it worked incredibly well, and the Grau and the HVK-30 were still as strong as before, so we had again a fairly balanced meta. This 3-way battle for dominance raged on in Season 9. Who would come out on top? In Season 10, the Grau received quite a huge nerf, so we were only left with the HVK-30 and the Fennec. That stayed for 2 seasons in total. But in Season 1 of 2024, we had the rise of the PDW. Kind of a replacement of the Grau in some way. It was the easy to use gun, and it was able to cover some range, unlike the Fennec. So we ended up with a fairly balanced meta. This 3-gun meta stayed for 3 months. But in Season 4, we had the most balanced meta of all time. With the new MG42 and the comeback of the DRH for some reason, we ended up with the MG42, DRH, HVK, Fennec, and PDW. We could also mention the Type 19, but it was never as strong as it was in scrims because we don't have loadout limitations in ranked. Anyway, it was the best meta on paper regarding weapon balancing. And that meta stayed exactly like this for 2 months. And honestly, even though my heart is stuck in 2022 with the MAC-10, CBR4, Kilo 141 meta, this was an extremely fun one too. But as we all know, all good things must come to an end. Season 6 was a 1-gun meta. BP-50. In Season 7, thanks to a small nerf, the BP-50 let the Odin smash everything in long range, which made it a 2-gun meta, which still sucked, but it was better than nothing. This stayed for 3 months, but thankfully, in Season 10, we had a new gun. This was none other than the USS-9, and thanks to a huge change in terms of game pace that the USS brought us, people started using more and more SMGs. Now, I wouldn't say that the Fennec was meta this season, but it definitely changed the dynamic of ranked games. Sadly, the Odin and the BP-50 were still there and a pain to play against. And that brings us to the present day. What does the meta look like now? Well, we're in the meta with the USS-9, the HVK-30, which made a comeback thanks to the BP-50 nerf, the Odin, which still slaps, and the Fennec, which thanks to game pace changes, is now usable again. And that's it for COD Mobile meta history. For fun, here are how much we've seen each of these weapons over the course of COD Mobile's life. But let's be real, the CBR4 was around way more than 10 months, wasn't it? That's because this video mainly covered the absolute best guns in each meta. The CBR4 was a top 10 gun for over 20 seasons, making it a constant presence even when it wasn't the top dog. These second tier guns, the ones that were always good but not always the best, they still heavily influenced the game. They affected the overall pace and strategy even if they weren't always in the spotlight. Same deal with the Fennec. Its popularity, or lack of it, impacted how effective other guns were. But quickly summarized, that was what happened in the last 57 seasons, or the last 63 months of COD Mobile history.